Just listen. I'm Barron Cruz from Charisma Matrix. Why is it so hard to just shut up and listen? It's almost impossible sometimes. We feel like we want to interject so much, like what we have to say is so sweet. How can we just sit there and listen? How can I listen to you spouting off something that's not important when I've got something so cool to say? You're going to think I'm so awesome after I say this. This is so spot on. Check out my stuff. I'm amazing. No, that's getting boring. Come on. Check this out. This is going to blow your mind. You're going to think I'm the coolest. See, what most people fail to realize is by listening, you are almost always impressing the person more, getting the person to like you more, relating more, growing in rapport more than no matter how cool or precise or spot on or great advice you have to say. Well, then why is it so hard for us to do it? People are naturally attracted to people who are good listeners, and they're so few and far between. The reason for this is because we feel like when we have something so good to say, we need to tell them, like, our advice is so good. You know, I experienced that. I know how to solve that problem. Here's how you do it. No, stop. I know everything you're going to say. Listen, I've been there. I know that. The problem is when you do that and you shush the other person you come across, you sound unempathetic, like you're not listening, like your cool story is more important for you to get out there, like some entertainer on the mic, than to actually hear what they're saying. Now, this reminds me back of something I heard years ago, in that one of the biggest differences between men and women when they communicate about problems is when men are presented with a problem. So say I'm listening to my buddy, whether it's a guy or a girl, and they say, I'm having this problem at work, and I'm thinking about this and this. What men are compelled to do is to give advice to the solution, okay? You need to know what this is. Here's what I would suggest. You know, I've actually been there. What I would do is I'd go and do this and this and this and this. That's how men typically approach things. And obviously there's a spectrum of this, but in general, this is what we see. And men want advice when it comes to that sometimes, but not always. Now, women on the other end, they really just want to feel more like they're heard. So when they come to you with a problem, they don't want to hear, oh yeah, go in, do this and this and this. They want to feel related to, like you understand what they're saying. And I find more and more, as I see this in real life, that men are actually more like women than you would think. It's not as cut and dry as that. And I find that oftentimes men would rather feel like they're just understood and heard and appreciated rather than come up with some solution to their problem. So what we're going to do, if I could encourage you to spend much more time listening, and I feel like this is almost like the whole eye contact thing. You hear, have good, strong eye contact. But what does that mean? Compared to what? Well, eye contact specifically, I think should be 90 to 95% of the time when you're listening, and maybe 80 to 90% when you're speaking. But when it comes to listening, how much should you listen? We hear things like twice as much as you speak, or 3 times as much as you speak, or every time you speak 2 sentences, you should listen 1. What I would encourage you to do is just try it for yourself and start by listening more than you normally would and see what happens. I think what you're going to suspect is going to happen is that the other person will just stop speaking and they'll be like, are you even listening to me? You're wrong. What you're going to find out is that in the past, you've been cutting people off way before they were done with their idea. So say you think that 2 sentences summarizes 80% of their idea, you're going to interject at the end of that and give your advice or your thoughts. Don't interject. Just step back and nod. Just have good eye contact. Let them know you're listening. Just an inquisitive look on your face if you're not nodding as much like we talked about. And see what they do. They're going to go on for another 15 minutes, and you're going to realize you would have interrupted them far before they're done. And at the end of that 15 minutes, they're thinking, man, Barron, what a great listener. I haven't felt that connected to anyone in a long time. Well, I don't know what it was, but what it was you were listening and you weren't interjecting. And at the end of it, maybe you just summarize what they said as opposed to coming up with some big solution, right? So say they talk for 15 minutes about it, you're like, wow, that's really interesting. So you really feel like in this situation that this is going on and you're gonna play this role and kind of hope for the best. And they're going to say, that's kind of a strange synopsis, but something like that. You're going to summarize everything they said into one very empathetic statement with a lot of feel words. So you feel like this is going to happen here and you're going to step in here and they're just going to feel very understood. Don't feel the need to interject your advice. Don't solve everyone's problems. Your solutions aren't as good as you think. Now, if someone says, God, I forget, I don't remember the multiplication table. What's 7 times 7? Well, in that instance, you don't want to say, I feel that if you got out the table, you could, no, you say 49. But at the same time, there's very few questions like that. And in communication, rarely are we on fact-finding empirical missions as simple as that. So what I want you to do is 2 things. First of all, I want you to listen and not cut people off and let them talk and talk and talk. And see in your head how you are cutting people off. See how it's stifling that rapport and that empathy. And then you'll get better at knowing when to interject and when not to, so you don't come across as another bobbling head waiting for their chance to speak. And the second thing you're going to do is not solve a problem. You're going to empathetically listen. If you feel compelled at the end of the paragraph or the end of the statement that they make, summarize it in a nice feeling word, very descriptive kind of way, just to show you understand what they're talking about. But don't solve it. And at first, when you do that, you're going to think, wow, the person was looking for me for a solution or advice. If they want your advice, they'll ask you. So let's say you say, oh, wow, so you feel like this, and you're going to come in here and it's going to start in 2 weeks. That's really interesting. If they want your advice, they'll say, oh yeah, what would you do? If you were in this, what would you suggest? Well, then it's advice that's sought after. What do they say? Advice is as good, free advice or unsolicited advice is as good as you pay for it, or free advice. Pretty much that advice, if not sought after, is less than worthless. You're wasting the person's time. You're breaking the rapport between them, and you're coming across as an arrogant, unempathetic person. So 2 things: listen, don't interrupt, and see how long people continue with that. See what they really wanted to say. A lot of times, a lot of the important information comes after here's the problem, and now I feel like this. They want to feel felt. They want to feel understood, and they want to have that rapport with someone who's patient enough and who doesn't have such a big ego that they need to throw out their advice. We're going to listen longer. We're going to provide understanding statements at the end. We're not going to provide advice unless it's asked for. This is going to take you a long way. And once people know you and respect you and believe that you're a great listener, they're going to come to you with more and more personal information. They're going to expose more to you to form those really nice friendships that you feel like you can tell people everything. How many people in your life do you feel like you can come to with just anything and they'll really understand you, right? You feel like, oh man, I can go to him with anything. It's not because he's got the best advice. It's because you feel like he's a great listener and he understands you. People feel understood when they are heard, not when you come with a sledgehammer of probably poor advice and dump it on them. I'm Barron Cruz. Try this out. I'll see you next week.